Welcome to Drinking on the Edge. I'm Dave the Fuhrer, its host. With me is the founder of Radio Free Rhinecliff and co-producer of the show, Matty Rosenberg. Joining us today, we have bi-continental guests. We have from Alsace, France, Thierry Frisch of the CIVA, the council that oversees all activities for Alsace region wines in France. Welcome to Drinking on the Edge, Thierry.
Thank you, David.
To me, you've been the face for Alsace for a good long time.
Yeah.
Joining us today from the Lower East Side for the moment, but she lives in a state nearby, Beth Von Benz. Beth is a veteran of the wine scene and restaurant management, consulting. Her MVB consulting is what she does these days. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so Beth's role in all of this is that she is one of Alsace's ambassadors promoting Alsace wines here in the U.S. And she's joining us to give a, should we say, feet on the ground perspective to add to Thierry's deep knowledge and understanding of what is Alsace wine. So on that note, what is Alsace?
Oh, good questions. It's really bit difficult to summarize Alsace wines in just in 2 or 3 minutes.
What makes Alsace unique?
Okay.
Separate from all other wine regions, or even
I know that you recall.
What is unique?
Okay, if you take one bottle of wine, and in this bottle we have 750 milliliters of wine. Alsace, that's a worldwide production. The bottle represents the worldwide production. Alsace represents 1 or 2 seats. That means nothing in terms of volume. But the Alsace wines, in the meantime, are absolutely unique, because we started to produce wine a long time ago during the 2nd centuries. So we have a very long history. We're famous to produce great wines, white wines mainly, because our production is based on the white wines represents about 90%, only 10% produced from the Pinot Noir. The Alsace wines are unique because in a very small region, we are located in the most northeastern part of France. In a very small region, you will find all the white wine you might expect, from the driest to the sweetest, from the most simple or easy to drink to the most complex terroir wines and so on. So that's why Alsace is absolutely unique. Very small region, but a huge range of wines in general, for all the gastronomies, by the way. Because I don't eat, Alsace is famous also for the gastronomy, because Alsace is the region in France which has the highest concentration, of Michelin stars restaurants every day. But I have the possibility to drink Alsace wines every day because they are very easy to pair with so many different gastronomy. And that's why Alsace is absolutely unique.
We'll get into that, the food aspect, a little bit more with Beth as we continue. But as Thierry was referring in the beginning of his talk there, the bottle he's referring to is the long fluted bottle. It's inextricably linked with Alsace. And in this, and it's been my experience too, that whereas compared to other regions in France, which you'd see traditionally the bottle would reflect the region or the district or something along that line, Alsace built its reputation upon not only having Alsace on the bottle, but the grape variety. And so selling through grape varieties, marketing through grape varieties has been something that Alsace has been known for, as opposed to much of their neighbors throughout France and throughout Europe. You mentioned Pinot Noir representing only 10%. Alsace also has built its reputation on this multiplicity of noble white grapes and how it is they express themselves. And again, on your culinary aspect, the fact that you're located north and south, more or less, along the Rhine River, across the river is Baden area of Germany, allows you a little bit of that overlapping influence back and forth, because Alsace it's a border region.
Yeah, it's a border region. And just wanted to explain you one thing. Of course, Alsace, the Rhine or Alsace area is very flat. So Alsace has already been always been a land of passage. So that means that we've been influenced by many countries, like the Swedish people, the Dutch people, Belgium, and of course the Germans. We have a long history with the Germans. My family name sounds more German than French, but I'm completely 100% French. Absolutely. And we fight, and you help us, the US help us to go back to France. And thanks for that once again. But now this belongs to the history. It's part of our history. But of course, we have this a mixed culture. And just to give you an example, the father, my grandfather, changed 5 times his nationality from French to German and so on and so on. And so that's why we have a lot, but there are a lot of differences in the meantime with the German wines. Of course, we have the same shape of the bottle. Okay. I don't have any explanation about this shape of the bottle. We have to use it by law since 1959, and that's nearly unique in France. But I don't have the right explanation, or maybe the shape of the bottle remind us the shape of the vineyards, very long and very narrow in the meantime. And also maybe this reminds us also the fact that in all the Alsace wines you will have this backbone acidity, this very long, fresh, clean, refreshing acidity. That's the only explanation I have about the shape of the bottles. But once again, we have to use this bottle since 1959. And of course, when you're in France, when you're in a restaurant, and when you see on tables this type of bottle, okay, it's Alsace for sure. On the other market, it's a little bit different because sometimes people confuse our wines with mainly the German wines, I would say, because once again, we have also the same name of the grape varieties. They produce everything, some Gewürztraminer and so on. But in the meantime, the wines will be different between the two countries. Even if we use the same grapes, the wines will be different. Because something very important to say is that in Alsace, we produce wine to be drunk with food. We love, once again, the gastronomy. We love to work, we love to eat, we love to drink wines with food. And so that's why the balance in the wines will be slightly different from the German wines. In France, in Alsace, we produce mainly dry white wines instead of in Germany. Most of the time, they will enjoy the wines by themselves. So the balance will be different, more based on sweetness. But in France, more well balanced, and most of the time, absolutely bone dry.
Yeah, and that was an easy benchmark to rely upon. Let's say maybe up until 20 years ago or so, but things have shifted. Those of us on the ground would like to see, and Beth could bear me out on this, that German wines are increasingly consumed outside of Germany, even though as dry. Though in Germany they've been enjoying dry wines for a reasonably long time, but climate change and consumer tastes have helped to shift that. And Alsace wines have always, let's say, mainly been dry when you're expressing the white varieties, but there's always been some sweeter versions. We'll talk about that in time to come. I think it bears mentioning as well, the Vosges Mountains have not yet come up, but one of the reasons is being one of for Alsace wine being as ripe and giving as they are, it has been the fact that even though it's as north as vineyards in Burgundy and Champagne, the protection of the Vosges Mountains and, of course, the Rhine River have helped to create this unique microclimate, or a series of microclimates that allows Alsace wines to be very ripe more readily, shall we say traditionally. Maybe climate change is shifting these things, but then there's the Western neighbors that I had just mentioned in France. So Beth, can I ask you, please, how do Alsace wines, how are they seen at the table or in the restaurants amongst people who may or may not know them?
Well, thank you very much, Terry, for your information, because every night I'm tasting wines with people in retail stores now. And I really feel that they ask me questions that I can take what you just said right now and use it tonight at Astor Wines in New York City.
My pleasure, Ben.
I thank you for all your wealth of knowledge. So I think the bottle is tough for some people because they do make that. They look and they say, oh, these wines are sweet. Oh, it's a Riesling. These wines are sweet. And I love that a lot of Alsace wines, if you turn the bottle around, it says dry in very large font. And I could just turn the bottle around and say, this wine is dry. And then talk a little bit about the wine. But it is the perception of the long, tall bottle that is somewhat related to German wines. On a wine list, it's different because it's in France and you can explain it and people would, but in a retail store, it's visually someone comes up, they see the tall bottle and then they see the word Riesling and you have to talk fast
excuse me, but just
yes.
one, since with the vintage 2021, now by law, we have to write dry on the, if the wine is dry, it must be written dry on the label. So we know, we're fully aware that in the past, maybe some people were confused about the balance of the Alsace wines because there was no limit of residual sugar in the wines. And some of them were slightly sweet, I would say. Okay. But now there's no more misunderstanding. You just read the label, the back label, it's written dry, half dry. So you know exactly the balance of the wine.
And that is a great visual tool
Definitely.
going
I can
forward. with
imagine
Alsace.
how overcome any misunderstandings that consumers may have. It's very valuable.
Yes, exactly.
Going back to why it is that Beth is joining us and why we're doing this Alsace focus right now is that Alsace Rocks is the campaign that Alsace has done on an annual basis. Every spring last year, it was in Boston, where Beth makes her home. And previous editions have had it in other cities. And this is the first one. It's going to happen April 29th in Manhattan. At what location is it, Beth?
It's GH on the Park, 54 West 40th Street. And it's from 12 to 5, a trade tasting. It's really going to be fantastic.
So be sure to sign up. Look for Alsace Rocks on your e-device.
And at Instagram, it's at Drink Alsace.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And Beth will be there, as well as Thierry and a few other of the Alsace ambassadors from around the U.S. This is the first time, though, it's been in New York City since 2018. It's been 6 years.
Yeah,
well, welcome. Thanks for coming back. We're looking forward to it.
It was the first time, yes, in 2018. Yes, I was there. I attended, and it was a great moment. And I'm sure that this year it was tasting in retailers, and also different producers will be there during the events with 10 different producers they will present their wines. And so it will be a great moment. Alsace Rocks means, I just want to explain this concept, which has been created, by the way, in the US. Alsace Rocks means that's, of course, we want to explain the minerality of the Alsace wines. You just mentioned before the microclimate, of course, the terroir, also important in Alsace. And the wines, Alsace Rocks means that the wines are bright, they shine a lot, and they perfect with the food. So they rocks, definitely.
So no implication there's going to be any loud rock and roll music at the event itself. Perhaps something a bit more restrained. But on that note, talking about the 10 producers, the vintners that will be at the event, Anne Trimbach being one of them, was kind enough to provide me with a few examples of her family's wine, a few Rieslings. So I'm going to pour myself a bit here of her Riesling 2021, her, should we say, beginning level, entry level standard dry Riesling. And another vintner we'll be hearing from at Alsace Rocks, Philippe Blanc, who happened to be the first guest on Drinking on the Edge. He'll be there as well. And I have a couple of wines from Philippe to taste of that lovely Pinot Gris that we had last year too. Mm-hmm. So please continue. Tell us a bit more about Riesling as I taste this from Trimbach.
Beth or me?
Oh, I'm not sure. I can say one thing about the wine that you're tasting right now is I poured that exact wine at a store last night. I poured that against a blend and then against a very high-end wine that was around the $60 mark. All three Alsace wines. And the wine that you're tasting right now, the 2021 Riesling Trimbach, won out of all the other wines, and people loved it. The Riesling people loved it. The people who didn't like Riesling loved it. It has a screw cap. It was fresh and bright with great acidity. And it was a broad range of people loved and bought this wine or took a picture of it and promised to come back and buy it at another time.
I joined their attitude. Actually, I screwed it last night to have it with my dinner of roast pork and sauerkraut. I figured I'd get in the mood, in the groove for Alsace, and it paired beautifully with my meal last night. So this is my second taste this morning.
Oh, I'm a fan of the Riesling of Trimbach, by the way. Of course, I represent, and my office represents all the wine producers of Alsace. But I must say that if you want to discover what means Alsace from Alsace, just taste the Riesling of Trimbach. It's, for me, I wouldn't say the best representative, but a very good representative of what we can produce, of something clean. A little bit austere, by the way, sometimes, because let me tell you something. I think that I'm just convinced that in Alsace we produce Catholic wines and Protestant wines. It sounds funny. The Riesling from Trimbach, what I call Protestant wine. And I remember that some years ago, unfortunately, he passed away some beginning of, well, last year, he passed away, Mr. Hubert. He used to travel quite a lot to the US. And sometimes when we were talking about the Riesling General and the Riesling of Trimbach, I used to say to Hubert, Mr. Hubert, you produce Protestant Riesling. He used to look at me. No, Thierry, Mr. Thierry, you can't say that. Do you really say that? He said, yes, of course I say that, because Protestant wine means close on themselves. And so just like, he said, okay, and finally, I think that you're right. You will definitely produce some Protestant wine. At the opposite, Catholic wines means wines will be a little more with more fatness, I would say, a little more open. But that's the magic part of Alsace. But the Riesling you have in your glass, David, for the, well, why not sauerkrauts? Possible, but all the seafoods, white meats, and in the meantime, by itself, because there is a new trend now, I think in the US also, but in France, people are looking for some fresh, clean, bone dry wines, and you have the perfect example of what people are looking for, definitely.
And I think also people perceive, like they say Trimbach, oh, they make a lot of wine. But if you compare the production in Alsace, even some of the larger producers are nothing compared to other regions.
Yeah.
So this is a very good example.
Yeah, definitely.
It is, and thank you for mentioning Hubert. It was actually Hubert who first was one of the early, shall we say, illuminators for me of wine overall. When I began my career in Chicago in the early 1990s, he would come to Chicago very frequently as one of his U.S. tours, and I had many good moments, both hearing him lecture and also engaging directly with him. So many good memories, and it was sad to have him know that he passed. But the family is still very much in good hands with Anne. Looking at the marketing, I look forward to seeing her and Philippe. Would you like to continue with Riesling and I continue with the Trimbach wines, or shall I slide over to the entry Pinot Gris from Boulogne? What would you prefer I do?
Pinot Gris.
Okay. Well, that's easy because I opened it last night as well. It takes less time to open the screw cap. I opened it last night. It was a bit too, for the way I made my meal last night, it was a bit too forward, a bit too not sweet but rich for the dish I prepared. If I'd prepared the dish a little differently, it would have gone perfectly with it. But it's like the Riesling more, shall we say?
Mm-hmm. But what about the dish you had yesterday?
It was a simple, slow roasted pork, not like haunch from the leg, and it was just covered with a bit of salt, slow roasted, and then some sauerkraut along the side. And again, of course, with the sauerkraut, and I took the fatty juice and I mixed it with the sauerkraut as well to take the sharpness off the sauerkraut, but still, it liked the Riesling more than the Pinot Gris. Had I made a cream sauce or maybe some mushrooms, the Pinot Gris probably would have been better with the.
And what about the vintage, David?
The Pinot Gris 2020.
Yeah, 2020 was a very warm vintage.
This is true.
It was a rich vintage. So during this vintage, we produced, I must say, quite rich, rich wines because of global warming. Just to give you an idea, my first, I'm an enologist, my first harvest in Alsace was in 89. And 89 was also warm vintage, early vintage. But we started to pick up the grapes to produce the Crémant in beginning of October. In 2020, we started to harvest end of August. So you see, in nearly more than 30 years, we pick up the grapes 1 month earlier. And 2020 was a very, very warm vintage. But about the Pinot Gris, I think that I like also, of course, I love all the wines from Alsace, but Pinot Gris is, for me, the most red white wine we produce in Alsace, the most red white wine. It has, of course, it's a white wine, but always a gold yellow color. It smells like a red wine because you have these underwoods, dead leaves, mushrooms, smoky, fresh and dried fruits. It's very complex, but not exuberant, but quite complex, quite close on itself, rich. And that's why I always decant, by the way, the Pinot Gris, even at home or in a restaurant, just to let it breathe, to have more aromas. And it's well balanced. Pinot for me means well balanced wine. You have fatness and freshness. Of course, in 2020, maybe a little more more fatness than the freshness. But in general, especially the wine from Blanc, Paul Blanc, they are always well balanced. Be patient. Be patient. Maybe you will taste it in 1 or 2 years. Never mind. You will see the wines will be maybe with time. When you have some sugar left, the wine will eat the sweetness, and the sweetness will disappear. Be patient. One reputation of the Alsace wines is that normally we have to drink them quite quickly, and that's a mistake. The oldest wine I ever tasted was a Riesling of Alsace, 1865. 1865. That's the oldest wine I ever tasted. Be patient, and the wines will be transformed. It's very common to keep the Bordeaux or the Burgundy wines for a long time in the cellar. You can do the same thing with Riesling and Pinot Gris of Alsace.
I concur with you about your impression of Pinot Gris. Shall we say eating the sugars if you give it a few years in your cellar? I agree with you about that. Beth, many years ago there was a big boom for Italian Pinot Grigio, and many people were unclear that it's the same grape, Pinot Grigio and Pinot Gris, different expressions in different way. How do you, shall we say, in the trenches when you are in a restaurant, how do you distinguish to customers when you're trying to sell them maybe a good quality Italian Pinot Grigio versus a good quality Alsace Pinot Gris? How would you how would you compare the two to make it clear to the customer what, so we say, general differences there might be?
I think that it's important to just lead out saying it's a richer wine. It's a richer style that's made in Alsace compared to Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris in other areas. So that's the first one. But as far as food, like last night I poured a Gris and people were asking, what can this go with? And after 5 minutes, it had listed off cheese, white meats, steak fish, shellfish. I mean, it was almost everything. You could even have, and I often say, people in Alsace, they drink white wine with meat. I mean, this can be typical. Braised meat, something with a white sauce. So, I mean, I think it's very good to start with food pairing oftentimes, because especially if you're in a restaurant, people understand. Pinot Grigio is a quaffing wine. It could go with something that's light and fresh. But the food pairing possibilities of an Alsace Pinot Gris are endless.
Yeah.
Really.
But you're right. And also with light game, they're very interesting. And for me, the difference, we don't, to be honest with you, in France, we don't drink a lot of Pinot Grigio. We drink Pinot Gris, but not a lot of Pinot Grigio. But from what I know, of course, you mentioned that the Pinot Gris of Alsace, same grape variety, but absolutely more concentrated, a little bit more, not richer, but more concentrated than a regular and simple Pinot Gris. Pinot Grigio, you can enjoy it by itself, but if you want to understand the Pinot Gris, you must eat something with it.
Complex is a word I often use.
Yeah, to be sure, Pinot Gris tends to be a bit more mouth-filling by comparison, shall we say, to Riesling. So talking about grape varieties, we've left out that there's actually a handful of other really notable grape varieties worth mentioning. There is Muscat, which is ubiquitous in many parts of France, but in far as the northern areas go, this is pretty far north for Muscat to exist as well. You have grape varieties that do extremely well. They have more of a Germanic reflection, Gewürztraminer and Silvaner, which can be found throughout different parts of Germany and doing quite well in some cases. So can you talk about these other grape varieties? And there's also, of course, Pinot Blanc, the other Pinot that you have over there. In addition to the Gris, you have the white, and that's Pinot Blanc. Again, in Germany, known as Weissburgunder, not so popular over there. Should we say performing it more expressively in different parts of France, such as there in Alsace. Can you talk about these other white grape varieties, how they express themselves in Alsace?
Well, let's start with the Pinot Blanc.
Yep.
Pinot Blanc is, if you want to discover the Alsace wines, maybe Pinot Blanc it's a good way, because the Pinot Blanc is quite discreet in terms of aromas. It's well balanced, belongs to the same family, belongs to the Pinot family, like the Pinot Blanc, like the Pinot Noir, or like the Pinot Gris. And once again, Pinot means well balanced. But if you have a Pinot Gris, will be quite concentrated, quite rich. Pinot Blanc will be easier and will be lighter. It's the best way, maybe, to if you don't know what to drink with some foods, just try a regular Pinot Blanc. It works perfectly. It's a chameleon wine. Chameleon wine. It will never compete with the foods. It will be a very good companion, but it will never compete with the foods, the Pinot Blanc. It's a very easy to drink, yes, wine. I like it. And just because it's quite discreet in terms of aromas, we use it a lot to produce our sparkling wine. Maybe we'll talk about that later, the Crémant d'Alsace.
Yep.
You just mentioned before the Muscat.
Yep.
Muscat d'Alsace. Well, Muscat, the surface of the vineyards of Muscat represents 2.5% of the total surface. So it's a very, very small production. And most of the time, we don't, and especially for this time, because in Alsace, if we compare the Muscat with the other part of France, the Muscat in Alsace will be vinificated completely dry, absolutely dry. And that's why we enjoy it. I love the Muscat because the reception wine, when you smell the wine, you have just the grapes in your glass. It's very aromatic, very fruity. But by the way, just a message, don't confuse fruitiness and sweetness. They're completely different. Yeah, but David, sometimes during my lecture, people, when they smell a very aromatic Muscat, or sometimes Pinot Gris, say, oh, the wine will be sweet. No, it's fruity. It's very aromatic, but don't confuse. Okay, but that happens quite frequently, unfortunately. And in Alsace, the Muscat is bone dry. And so that's why when you drink it, it's when you swallow it, clean your mouth, and after you can enjoy what you want. So that's what I'm looking for when I drink a glass as an aperitif. We'll enjoy a lot of the Muscat also for the white asparagus in Alsace, and that's the peak period of the white asparagus in France, and especially in Alsace, because we produce a lot of asparagus, like in Germany, by the way. But it's very complicated when you have some vegetable notes in the dish to find a wine to drink with, because of the bitterness, because of the vegetal notes, which will destroy the structure of the wine. So that's why, as you have some vegetable notes and some bitterness in the Muscat, it's very easy to pair white asparagus with Muscat. You mentioned the Gewürztraminer. That's maybe, the most complicated to write, Gewürztraminer. And maybe it's one of the most famous grape variety from Alsace, and it's the youngest in the meantime. During the Middle Ages, we used already some Pinot Noir, some Riesling, some Sylvaner, and so on. But the Gewürztraminer is a spicy evolution of the Traminer, which has been selected by the end of the 19th centuries. So it's more than 150 years old. And Gewürz means spicy Traminer, very aromatic. And what is amazing with the Gewürztraminer is that you can travel with it in the Asian countries, very aromatic in terms of tropical fruits with lychees, mangoes, passion fruits, and so on. And very creamy, very rich, and a gentle touch of bitterness on the aftertaste. And that's why I love and roses also, by the way, on the nose. So that's why the Gewürztraminer is absolutely unique in terms of aromas. That's for the Gewürztraminer. The other grape, can we talk about the Pinot Noir, David?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a bit as we get to Crémant, but I just want to kind of ourselves briefly about the whites. And Sylvaner, again, small percentage, like Muscat, very small percentage. But when it's done right, it's been my experience, Sylvaner and Alsace can be breathtaking. Again, a more discreet wine, like Pinot Blanc, but it has its own unique qualities, which I also enjoy. And I look hard to find a good one. If I'm lucky, I will buy it quickly. And there's other grape varieties as well. We can talk about. You find small amounts of Chasselas, so on and so forth. Again, there's one producer in particular in Colmar whose Chasselas I think is tremendous and ages beautifully.
You just mentioned the Chasselas from Colmar. Is it from Chauffit?
It indeed, from Mr. Chauffit, yes.
From Bernard, I know, it's a very good friend of mine. But just want to mention something about the Sylvaner. Thanks for talking about the Sylvaner. Because in the past, let's say 50 years ago, the Sylvaner represented 25% of the surface of the vineyards. Yeah. It represented a huge production because we used mainly the Sylvaner, the wine of Sylvaner, to be blended with other grapes. That was the base of the blended Edelstviker, for example, for the blended wines. But of course, Sylvaner is, I love the Sylvaner too, just like you, David, because Sylvaner, you mustn't expect from a Sylvaner the richness of a Pinot Gris, the exuberance of Gewürztraminer. It won't be so racy like a Riesling. Sylvaner is a simple wine for the simple foods. It's a daily wine with a very large and refreshing acidity. And so that's why with our local foods, seafoods, oysters, and so on, it's absolutely perfect. So thanks for talking. Don't forget, please, the Sylvaner. It represents now around 7% of the production, unfortunately. But in the meantime, we took off a lot of wine stock of Sylvaner to plant instead Pinot Gris. But fortunately, we preserve the best vineyards of Sylvaner. And that's why the general quality of the Sylvaner went up completely. So if you find some Sylvaner, go on. Good value for money. Very interesting wine. Very easy to drink. Go on, buy them.
Let's see. Let's go back to the issue of Alsace rocks, and rocks imply soils. One of the things I learned early in my studying for in the Court of Master Sommeliers many years ago, Beth, you would bear me out on this, is Mr. Wayne Belding was Mr. Alsace and loved talking about the terroir of Alsace because of its complexity by comparison to, I think, any other French wine region and many other wine regions around the world. It is amazingly complex. And in that, there is a good reason for not farming, shall we say, on the flatlands for everyday wines. That's important. But individual parcels and vineyards at sites, Grand Cru sites, Alsace is very wisely regulated for a good long time, finds its way into the expressions of these complex soils and microclimates that exist within Alsace. On that note, Madame Trimbach and her U.S. importer of tile were kind enough to provide me a sample of their 2018 Grand Cru Geisberg. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I opened it last night, and it was clear to me, as fun and delicious this wine is now, I'm killing a child, shall we say, by opening it now, because this has a capacity to not only last, but improve. It's for many years. This is a wine for the cellar, but here we are talking about it now. So please speak a little bit about the diversity of terroir within Alsace.
Okay. In Alsace is in fact a showcase of all the type of soil you can find around the world. We identified 12 different type of soils, and each soil, of course, will have a special effect on the wine. If we have 12 or 13 model soils, you can imagine a mixity of limestone clay, sandstone clay, and so on and so on. Drawing a geological map of Alsace is impossible. It's just impossible, because from 1 meter to another meter, the soil will change completely, and the expression of the wine will change completely. And that's why, by the way, we use more than 12 different grape varieties. During the Middle Ages, we used to produce wine from more than 40 different grapes, just because we understood during this time it was impossible to adapt 1 or 2 grapes to so many different soils. Let's take the example of Burgundy. I don't want to be too technical, but let's talk about Burgundy. In Burgundy, they have one type of soil. It's a mix of clay and limestone soil. And they have mainly 2 grapes, Chardonnay for the white, Pinot Noir for the red. And they produce over there great wines, but from one type of soil. It's a mix of clay and limestone. But in Alsace, we have 13 different types of soil. So that's why we have so many wines. The benefits for the consumer is sometimes difficult to understand, but just imagine if you just study Alsace, you will see that in the plain, we will produce many great variety wines. You will have the expression of the Riesling, of the Sylvaner, and so on and so on. In the plain, because we have over there only gravels. On the foothills, down the Vosges, we'll have sedimentary rocks. And over there, the wines will be quite powerful in terms of acidity, freshness, in terms of fatness, richness, and alcohol, and saltiness, and so on and so on. but the wine will be large, and they must be kept in the cellar for a long time. Good example, Geisberg. It's a sedimentary rocks over there, mix of limestone, marl, clay, and so on. So all the wines produced over there, they need time, 4, 5, 6 years before they will be completely open. And at the top of the mountains, you will find what we call the crystal rocks, like granite, mainly granite. And over there, the wine will be very pure, clean, upright, fresh, clean acidity. So it's easy to understand the terroir soil. On the plain, gravels, grape variety wines, foothills, full-bodied wines, rich, powerful, and on top of the mountains, the wine will be just elegant. And nowhere else in the world you will find this diversity of soils in a very small region.
I'm a great lover of Riesling expressing itself, excuse me, from limestone for just the immediate enjoyment and the long-term ageability when it's done well. Limestone for me is my favorite Riesling expression, and I'm glad to have this Geisberg here to express that to me. But looking at this being a 2018 vintage, just coincidentally, the folks at Skurnik who import Philippe Blanc were also kind enough to provide me with a 2018 expression of Pinot Gris single vineyard Petergarten, which I have here as well. I just opened it. And so at least we have two wines, two single vineyard, two Grand Cru wines from 2018 to compare side by side. Yes, please.
Garten is not a Grand Cru.
Excuse me.
No, you're welcome. You will come. No problem. You will
It's
come.
a single site.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an area located in Kinsheim, but it's not a Grand Cru. But even if it's not a Grand Cru, you're right, David, because you will have also a terroir effect in the wine.
Yeah, sense of
You want
place.
Grand Cru, but it's just located area. But it's
That was
funny
one of
excuse me, Beth. It's
No, don't.
it's my fault.
No.
To say it's very interesting to compare these two wines. They will be nearly 6 years old, and normally they should be matured. Even for the Geisberg, let's come back in 20 years, the wine will be still here. Me, I don't know, but the wine will be there for sure.
Agreed.
Please.
When I first started buying wine, Philippe Blanc was very active in the market. And he was one of the first people that I met from Alsace who really understood the sommelier, the wine buyer here. He was extremely friendly and knowledgeable. And I can remember going way back my first year, going to the Skurnik tasting and him having like 50 wines. Maybe some he showed to some people, but other people he had in the back, and he would pull out his little stash to all of the buyers in New York City. And he's a wonderful man, really amazing, and made me really understand Alsace at quite an early stage in my restaurant buying career. And so the first wine list I ever made, it had 10 whites and 10 reds, and this wine you're tasting right now was on it, David.
That's wonderful recommendation from you, Beth. In fact, you as a very savvy, experienced buyer for restaurants throughout your career are able to delineate specifically the values of these wines. Thank you for that.
David,
So-
excuse me,
Yes,
David. You were talking about the Pinot Blanc, Patergarten, and Philippe Blanc.
Pinot Gris.
Pinot Gris, excuse me, Pinot Gris, yes. Just a very quick story. My first trip to the US was in 1997. And I had to organize a lecture about the Gewürztraminer in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere over there. Lancaster, it's middle of nowhere.
Nice town. I've been there a few times.
And after that, I had the pleasure to go back to New York, and we had a lunch with Philippe Blanc. We were in Jean-Georges Van Gerichten in New York. And I remember that's one of our best pairing. And I still remember it. We had the Pinot Gris, Patergarten, vintage 95. It was quite young. And the dish was dates stuffed with foie gras. And the match was just amazing. And I can still remember the place, the taste of the wine, the dish, and the face of Philippe enjoying his wine with this dish. It was Just, it's a very good memory. It's the same wine now. It's very, very funny. Thank you for that. Sorry if I interrupt you.
I think also Philippe was very clever because he put some of his wines in half bottles. And
Mm.
when you're pairing or the chef decides to whip out a mid course without you knowing it, it was always nice to have a little half bottle of something of his wine that you could on the spot pair with a particular dish. So
Absolutely right.
Always useful. So for those who are unable to attend the event on the 29th, promoting Alsace wines in New York City, um, for whatever reason, there's also the worth mentioning that I've had nothing but impeccable, kind, easygoing hospitality from vintners in Alsace during the many times I've traveled there, either with a group, with a friend, or on motorcycle. Those days are gone. I had a motorcycle in Germany for a while, and I did my last tour in Alsace was visiting producers specifically to investigate the uptick, the increase of quality and quantity, small though it may be, but the quality was coming up a lot, about Pinot Noir. And I visited about, I don't know, 8 vintners, and their Pinot Noir, whether or not they're available in the US, some are, some aren't, struck me as really rising in quality. Because to give you some clarity about my connection with Alsace, my first touring of Alsace was before I entered the wine business. It was with my dear friend from Stuttgart, Hammoud, who took me and my girlfriend at the time and his wife to just a quick couple days across the river into Alsace. And it was my first taste of a wine tour. This was, oh my gosh, 1990 perhaps. And I remember this new experience and the kindness and hospitality people were showing me. May have been one of the reasons I got into the wine trade a couple of years after that. But to this day, you'll find amazing hospitality from many people who are making wines throughout Alsace. Of course, wine tourism has become a bit more mature since my first visit there 34 or so years ago. But again, it's worth mentioning that there is also the red wine, Pinot Noir. We started talking about that at the beginning of our conversation. Let's go to it now. Pinot Noir, it's a red wine. We know it from many places around the world. Burgundy, which has been mentioned, but of course it's spread considerably. But Alsace has also been expressing itself with red wine, with Pinot Noir for a good long time. How does Alsace Pinot Noir differ or add to the understanding of Pinot Noir?
Okay, I don't know how I have to start talking about the Pinot Noir, because the Pinot Noir it's not an evolution of the quality of the Pinot Noir
What?
we have. It's a revolution. It's not an evolution, it's a revolution, definitely. Because I would say, what I used to say is that in the past, people used to produce the Pinot Noir like they produce some white wines. At the beginning, this grape variety didn't belong to the noble grape. We have 4 noble grapes: Riesling, Pinot Gris, Gewürztraminer, and Muscat. And unfortunately, they just forgot to add the Pinot Noir. And that was a mistake. But I think that with the new generation, the enologists also, they travel a lot, and they went back to Alsace, and they brought back the knowledge how to produce a great Pinot Noir. I think that they understood different things. If you want to produce a great Pinot Noir, great means spheric, means silky, means aromatic, means elegance with freshness, and so on and so on, not over oaked. That's what we used to produce in the past with a very long maceration and extraction. Now we just work with, we just want to produce a very elegant Pinot Noir. If you want to produce this type of wine, you have to respect 4 rules. 4 rules. The first one, you have to work with very low yield, 30, 35 hectoliters per hectare, normal. So reduce your yield to have something concentrated. You must have the good ripeness. It's not a question of sugar or potential of alcohol. The pips must be browns. That's nothing else. So before to pick up the grapes, the wine producers go with the vineyards and they just eat the berries and taste the grapes, and especially the pips. The seeds must be completely browns. Low yield, sanitary aspect. We are talking about Pinot. Pinot means very thin skin, very sensitive to the gray rots. So that's why we have to select the right berries to be vinificated and to eliminate all the berries affected by the gray rot. That's happened sometimes. And the last rule is, like in Burgundy, if you want to produce this great Pinot Noir, clay and limestone soil. And we have this type of soil in Alsace. And people definitely understood that. From the main difference between the Pinot Noir we produce at the present time and 30 years ago, extraction, we had just understood that the Pinot Noir is maybe one of the most elegant red wines we can produce. So we must take care about the grapes in the vineyards and during the vinification. And that's what people understood in Alsace. And just to finish by this, and maybe Beth, if you want to add something, but what is amazing is that for, of course, the Pinot Noir, but for all the Alsace wines, we have an amazing value for money for these. The wines, I wouldn't say they're not cheap, but they're cheap, but they're not so expensive. And we have a very good quality for a very good price in the meantime.
I was recently in a wine store in the West Village called Lerdoux Wines, which is quite a lovely place. And I was pouring the Marcel Dice Rouge 2020. The minute that wine was opened, it filled the air with the most incredible aromas. I mean, it was beautiful. It was quite concentrated for a lot of the stereotypical Pinot Noirs that come from Alsace, but it was beautiful. Drinking well, it was $39. If you walked around the store and went to Burgundy, no way would be anything that would be even near that. And if you're talking about California also, this wine was a bargain for coming right out of the bottle, drinking well, and the descriptors that you were just using, elegant, aromatic. I mean, it checked every box off. It was fantastic. So it was a very good example of exactly what you were just talking about.
And we don't want to compete with Burgundy. Burgundy is Burgundy, Alsace is Alsace. We don't want to compete with Burgundy. And maybe we'll talk about the Crémant d'Alsace in the future, but the same with Champagne. We have our own identity and we want to preserve it. And the thing with the Pinot Noir is that we have also some light, fruity Pinot Noir and some other more full bodied. You were talking about Marcel Dice, Jean-Michel Dice. We were talking before about Philippe Blanc, Paul Blanc with the Pinot Noir F, or we can talk about Alderman, we can talk about Mélanie Pfister. We have so many great producers of Pinot Noir in Alsace. And what I want to add is that since 2022, the two Grand Cru allowed to produce some Pinot Noir, Berg de Bar and the Engst in Wettolsheim.
And for those people who are interested, those wines will be available in the market later this year or in next year.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we wind up here, I just want to say that Alsace has been a leader in organic and biodynamic growing in France. I don't know what your percentage of organically grown vineyards is by comparison to other regions in France, but it's always been in the forefront of growing in this way, more so over time. It's also been noteworthy as a kind of a leader in the biodynamic uptick of viticulture that started about 30 years ago or so, with folks like Olivier Umbrecht and his family experimenting with it and applying it and adapting it for what makes sense for Alsace. Olivier is a brilliant man in that regard. I really have appreciated his tutelage over the years in that. So again, for people who are looking for organic expressions and biodynamic expressions, Alsace is a place to look for.
Definitely. You must know that we started to produce wine in organic and biodynamic. Organic, it was in 61. And biodynamic, it was in 69. So we are the pioneer in France with organic and biodynamic. And at the present time, more than 36% of the vineyards are conducted on organic or biodynamic in Alsace. And we increase the surface of, it used to be 5 to 10% in the past year. Now it's between 1 and 2% per year, but it's now 3% in 1 year. So it's still increasing. And what I want to say is that's not just a mode, we don't want to, we don't work on organic and biodynamic because it's not a marketing aspect. It's not just because the market demands this type of produce. It's just a way of life in Alsace.
Well, clearly, because you were doing it long before it became a marketing
But
tool.
you know what? We just want to preserve. We just want to preserve the environment. We just want to preserve the to be sure that the kids of our kids will be still able to produce some wines in the future. We want to preserve the people who work in the vineyards, the people who work in the cellar, and also the people who our consumers, our guests, our people will buy our wines. So it's definitely a lifestyle. It's not a fad at all. It's definitely. I just want to insist on that because it's firmly. We have this deep investments in the green produce in Alsace, definitely.
And Beth, does this make a difference to the American consumers or members of the trade you encounter?
Huge. And it is a very key tool to sell the wine. So you're saying it's not marketing, but I'm saying it really helps a lot. With a wine buyer, it's important. With a customer, it's important. Whenever I lead and talk about the wine, that's one of the first things I mention. You could turn the bottle around. It says there right on the bottle to people. So it is very important. But kudos to Alsace for doing this since the 60s. I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So again, before we wrap it up here, I gotta give a shout out to what has been for me kind of a signature wine in my wine career these past few decades, and that is also the flagship wine for the Trimbach family. They're Frederick Emile. Again, the folks at Tab and Anne were kind enough to grace me with a bottle. They're 2015. This speaks to the ageability. Again, this is a wine that is 8.5 years old, but it is not even anywhere near mature. I've had the experience over my career of tasting many vintages of Frederick Emile Riesling from Trimbach at various stages of their development. This was honestly, I didn't ask for this, but it was just bestowed upon me. I feel so lucky to have this here with you today.
Frederick Emile. Yeah, it's a mix of two Grand Cru, by the way.
Yep.
I remember Geisberg and Schubert de Ribeauvillé, I think so. But yes, and this is a very good example of why people must be patient with the wines. I think that this vintage is interesting, 2015, and the Trimbach family keep this production for a long time in the cellar before to sell it.
Yes.
They just understood, and they're fully aware that these wines need time. It's a very deep. It's I wouldn't say creamy, but you have some fatness. It's bone dry, absolutely bone dry, like all the wines from Trimbach. But I love this very fat, oily, and fresh acidity in the middle. It's a great wine, and especially for the white meat, for poultry, especially. It's just amazing.
It is indeed. So lastly, again, to kind of wrap up a little bit, for folks looking for these wines, they're widely available throughout the United States, Trimbach and Blanc both. And to give you some idea about the price for these, both the Pinot Gris and the Riesling entry wines from both of these are, I get give or take a few dollars, around $20, $25. The Pater Garden from Blanc, a small step up from that. And then the Geisberg and the Frederick Emile Rieslings from Trimbach, a considerable step up in price, but well worth it. So you can look for these wines throughout the United States and all the websites. Please go to their websites. Go to the CIVA website. I think it's just civa.fr, correct?
Alsacewines.com.
That makes it easier. Look at that, alsacewines.com. Thank you for that, Thierry.
Alsace.com.
Excellent. Okay. Beth, Thierry, thank you for joining Drinking Edge on the Edge. I look forward to seeing you on the 29th in Manhattan.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful to be here.
I won't be there, but I will think of you because I have to go to Asia. I will be in Asia during this time, so I have to travel to China and Hong Kong to promote the Alsace wines. So I'll
be there.
The other side.
Well, we will toast you. We will salute you in your absence.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So I will do the same in Hong Kong for you.
Please do.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Have a good day.